Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Kazuri Alameen, and I want to speak briefly about forgiveness. This is a very, very profound topic, and I'm convinced that we hear this word in some shape, form, or fashion every day. But a lot of people don't have an understanding of what this means. We begin to mimic a lot of stuff that we've been told, that we read, that we heard, that he said, she said, and there is a season for that. But my question to you today is forgiveness necessary to you? Based on your understanding of forgiveness, one of the definitions of forgiveness is to be forgiven for something, the act of forgiving. One of the other definitions for necessary is something that's required to be done. So where are you at when you hear a question like this, is forgiveness necessary? How will you know when you have forgiven someone? What happens within your own spirit for you to know you have forgiven someone? Forgiveness is also from yesteryear and yesterday. Forgiveness definitely frees us up to deal with the present. How will you know when you have arrived at the present? What needs to go off within your own mind, body, and soul so that you can look at yourself in the mirror and say you've forgiven him or her? How will you know that? What signs are you looking for? What happens? A lot of times when we talk about forgiveness and forgiving others and forgiving this and forgiving that, how specific are we? Will you know that you've forgiven somebody at Thursday at 6 o'clock, the sun was shining outside? How do you know when you've forgiven somebody? This is how true healing takes place. Forgiveness is a process. It's a process. It's not overnight. Sometimes I've worked with people who forgive people quick, and they don't even understand what forgiveness means to themselves. Also, one of the most profound dynamics as it relates to forgiveness, ladies and gentlemen, is there any yesteryear and yesterday that you're holding on to with yourself? Is there anything in your private thoughts that you've not forgiven yourself for that's still surfacing and resurfacing when you're by yourself? This is one of the hardest pills to take. Is there anything that you're holding on to that you need to forgive yourself for before you move out and go to forgive anybody else? Once again, everywhere you go, you take you with you. You can't go to work and leave yourself at home. So this is very, very vital. So I would encourage you to look at forgiveness from a different perspective. Is there anything, once again, that you need to forgive yourself for? Once again, if there's somebody that you need to forgive somebody for something that they've not asked for forgiveness, where you at with that? How are you coping with that? If there's something that you need to forgive somebody for something and they've asked you for forgiveness, where you at with that? It's a process. So I would encourage you to look at this thing from a different perspective. Once again, forgiveness means the act of forgiving, of being forgiven. Necessary is something that's required. Where you at in this required dynamic? If you're anywhere, and if you're not anywhere, how will you know when you need to travel there? How will you know when you arrive at your forgiveness date, your forgiveness time, your forgiveness moment? How will you know that? Because that don't need to come from nobody else outside of you, because somebody else outside of you had your experiences as it relates to forgiving somebody or something. They didn't have your experience. So they can't tell you how to forgive somebody. They didn't have your experience. So once again, how will you know when you have arrived? How will you know what is necessary to meet that criteria that you set for yourself? How will you know? It's the inside job, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, it's not outside. So once again, is forgiveness necessary? And how will you know when you have arrived at forgiving yourself first and foremost and anybody else? Think about it. Peace.